Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're venturing into a role you might not have encountered much, maybe the strategy coordinator in mission work. It's
Right.
a term that might sound a bit new, maybe a bit corporate even. We're here to unpack what it actually means.
Yeah, it definitely caught our attention. And for this deep dive, we've looked at some really interesting notes that shine a light on the purpose and, the operations behind this role.
Exactly. Our goal is to really understand the core meaning, the objective of a strategy coordinator. And what we found, honestly, it gives a pretty compelling view of the very focused methods used in expanding religious communities,
hmm
sort of understanding the engine behind it all.
And right at the heart of it, as these notes show, the main aim for a strategy coordinator is really facilitating the rapid growth, the multiplication of churches within one specific people group.
Okay.
And the why behind this, often mentioned, is fulfilling what's known as the Great Commission.
Okay. Let's get into the nuts and bolts then. This strategy coordinator, and the notes are pretty clear. It isn't just a title you put on a door. It's a specific role. So what does someone in this role do?
Well, the main thing, the defining thing, is their focus. It's very specific. So unlike maybe broader outreach, a strategy coordinator zooms in on a particular population segment, or maybe a geographical area like a city, a district, or often a distinct people group.
Right.
That targeted approach is absolutely key.
And what's the big picture goal? I mean, what are they trying to achieve with this kind of laser focus?
The main objective really is to develop and then, crucially, implement a comprehensive strategy, a long-term one. This isn't about quick conversions or anything.
Ah.
The aim is to foster a self-sustaining, indigenous meaning, locally led church planting movement within that specific group.
So the community eventually runs itself faith-wise.
That's the idea,
Hmm.
that they have the capacity to independently grow and nurture their own faith community.
Interesting. It sounds like this coordinator has like a foot in two different worlds almost. The notes mention connections to both the harvest field and the harvest force. Can you break that down?
Yeah, that's a really critical distinction. So the harvest field, that refers to the people, the individuals within that target group who haven't yet adopted the beliefs being shared.
Okay, the potential converts.
Right. And the harvest force, on the other hand, that's made up of the Christians who feel called to participate in the outreach, the evangelism. The strategy coordinator acts as this crucial link, this facilitator between those two.
So they're not necessarily the ones doing all the direct face-to-face stuff all the time.
Not primarily, no. Their role is more about enabling, coordinating the work of others, which means they need to be pretty skilled at working with all sorts of Christian groups and individuals.
Right.
And interestingly, the notes really stress that the coordinator has to prioritize the needs of that target people group above, say, their own organization's agenda or personal goals.
That makes a lot of sense. The focus has to be on that community's journey, not just like organizational stats.
Exactly. And it's a long-term commitment. The strategy coordinator stays involved, through thick and thin until that group reaches a point where they can sustain and grow their faith community themselves without needing ongoing outside help.
And it seems like it's designed to be dynamic, like people from the harvest field who join then become part of the harvest force.
Precisely. That's the engine. New believers become the very people who then reach out within their own community. It's meant to be this self-perpetuating cycle. That's what drives a truly self-sustaining movement.
Okay, now let's zoom in a bit on the practical side. What does a strategy coordinator actually do day to day in relation to these two groups? Let's start with the harvest field, the people they're trying to reach. Research is highlighted first. Seems logical.
Oh, absolutely. Any good strategy starts with understanding. So this research involves mapping out communities, identifying the specific people groups, and even trying to understand what the notes call spiritual strongholds.
Spiritual strongholds. Okay, that sounds like trying to figure out the existing beliefs, the cultural factors that shape how people think.
That's basically it. Yeah, gaining insight into their worldview so the message can be shared in a way that actually connects, that's culturally relevant.
Yeah.
The notes also mention using things like surveys to gather info.
Okay, so it can be quite systematic, data-driven in a way. What comes after the research? The notes mention platforms. That's not the first word I'd think of here.
Right, but it's really interesting. Platforms here means setting up community development projects, things that address real, felt needs.
Like what?
Well, examples given are like tailoring apprentice centers for women, maybe literacy training, public health education. things like that.
Huh. So it's not just about direct religious teaching then. It's about building trust, building relationships by meeting tangible needs first.
Exactly. And these platforms can also do something else pretty important. Provide financial support for the local people who are leading the church planting by helping them start small businesses, maybe micro businesses, that kind of thing. It gives them an income, obviously, but it also gives them natural ways to connect with people in the community.
Wow, that's a really integrated approach, becoming part of the fabric of the community. Okay, next up is evangelism and discipleship. That sounds more like what people might traditionally expect.
It does, but again, the coordinator's role is often overseeing a whole range of methods. The notes list quite a few, like using the Jesus film, running small groups, Bible storytelling, distributing audio recordings, personal chats, even radio or drama. It's a diverse toolkit.
And it's not just the initial contact, right? There's a big emphasis on discipleship.
Huge emphasis. The notes talk about this dual goal. You want to broadly share the message so everyone has a chance to hear it, but you also need to make sure those who respond are guided into, well, deep relational discipleship.
So it's not just about numbers.
No, it's about equipping these new believers so they can then guide others in their own communities. It's in depth.
Which flows naturally into the next point, church planting. This seems like the ultimate outcome they're working towards with the harvest field.
That's right. The focus is identifying and training local leaders, supporting new churches starting up. But the key phrase is Indigenous church planting movement.
Meaning?
Meaning the goal isn't just planting a few churches that always need outside support. The vision is for these churches to reproduce themselves organically. Churches planting more churches until the whole people group has access to a local faith community led by their own people.
Okay, got it. So that covers the harvest field side. Now, what about their role with the harvest force, the Christians involved in the work? First up is prayer mobilization.
Yeah, this is seen as foundational, absolutely crucial. The coordinator works to build and nurture networks of people specifically praying for that target group. And the language in the notes is quite strong, praying for the land, the people, binding strongholds, releasing people from what's seen as spiritual bondage.
It sounds pretty active. The notes even mention prayer walking teams doing what they call spiritual warfare.
That's the perspective, yes. Viewing prayer as a direct form of spiritual engagement in those communities.
Okay. After prayer, there's recruiting. How does the coordinator handle that?
It's mainly about education, letting other Christians know about the specific needs of this unreached group. So sharing info through newsletters, brochures, face-to-face meetings with individuals, churches, other organizations.
Trying to mobilize different gifts and skills.
Exactly. Mobilizing the diverse talents within the broader Christian community for this specific focus.
Which leads to partnerships. Seems essential for something this big.
Absolutely. The coordinator tries to guide churches or mission agencies, even individuals, to adopt the people group, encouraging them to channel resources, time, skills, money in a focused way to support the local work.
So fostering cooperation.
Yeah, building cooperative partnerships between different Christian groups instead of everyone doing their own thing separately.
Makes sense. And finally, for the harvest force, equipping personnel.
Right. This is about finding people willing to go, short-term or long-term, but also making sure they get good, effective training. Training that's specific to the culture and the context they'll be working in.
Okay. Now, all these different tasks aimed at both the field and the force. They need to be coordinated somehow. That's where the master plan comes in.
Exactly right. The notes call it a comprehensive strategic plan or a roadmap. It guides all the activities towards that ultimate goal, the self-sustaining church planting movement. It's about making sure all the pieces work together effectively.
And it's not just about the plan itself. The coordinator needs serious personal preparation, too. What does that involve?
Several key things. First, learning the language and really understanding the culture of the target group. That's seen as critical for communication, for building real relationships and making sure any churches started are actually relevant there.
Yeah, you can't connect if you don't understand their world. What else?
The notes also stress ongoing personal spiritual growth, really understanding missiological principles, the theory and practice of mission work, and also having an awareness of, well, spiritual warfare concepts.
Why the spiritual warfare part?
The idea presented is that as new beliefs take root, There might be resistance or opposition, and the coordinator needs to be spiritually prepared for those kinds of challenges.
Okay. So if we were to summarize based on these notes, what are the defining characteristics of a strategy coordinator?
Well, fundamentally, they have this intense focus on one specific, often neglected people group or area.
Right.
Second, they're working across two spheres: the potential converts, the harvest field, and the missionary force, the harvest force.
Mhm.
Their work involves a lot of research, prayer mobilization, recruiting, partnerships, setting up those community platforms, training workers,
Mhm.
overseeing evangelism, discipleship, church planting. It's a broad scope.
And they do it through collaboration, working with lots of different Christians and groups.
Absolutely key. Collaboration is central.
And it's all guided by this comprehensive master plan that they develop and implement, all aimed at fostering that self-sustaining, locally led church movement.
That's the essence of it. A really multifaceted role, but with a very clear long-term vision.
Yeah. You know, this deep dive into the strategy coordinator role, it really highlights the very intentional, very coordinated efforts that can go into expanding religious influence around the world.
It certainly does. And it brings up a pretty big question, doesn't it? When you consider this level of strategic planning, this long-term focus on building local movements, what are the potential long-term impacts, socially, culturally, within a community where this happens? Definitely something to think about.